This is J. Krishnamurti's fifth public talk in Saanen, 1964.
I would like, if I may, this morning talk about something which seems to me is very important, not as an idea or a concept or a formula to be carried out. Concept, formula, and an idea really prevent deep understanding of facts as they are. I mean by a fact the observation of an activity, a movement, in the very moment of action itself. The perceiving of a fact is in the moment of the movement of action itself. And that fact, unless one comprehends it to a tremendous degree, to a great depth, we shall always be hounded by fear. And it seems to me most of us have this enormous weight of conscious or unconscious fear. And I would like to go this morning into this complete resolution of that fear, the total understanding of it, so that when one leaves this hot tent, one will be literally, actually, and factually be free of this burden of fear. So, if I may suggest, please listen rather than argue with me. We will argue a little later. We'll exchange a lot of words. We will verbalize our feelings and our thoughts a little later. But if we could listen in the sense negatively, not with any positive assertion of the act of listening, but just to listen. I am communicating with you, you are not communicating with me. We want to tell you something. Therefore you have to listen. And in the very act of listening, then you will be able to commune with the speaker. But most of us are incapable of this negative, silent listening. Not only to what is being said now, but also during the everyday existence. When you go out for a walk, listen to the birds, to the whisper of trees, and to the murmur of the river, and listen to the mountains, to the trees, and to the sky beyond. Just to listen. So that you are indirectly in communion. And you can only listen when one is negatively silent. Not that there is a positive silence or a negative silence, but when one listens without any effort, without any mentation taking place, without verbalizing, without quarreling, without discussing, just to listen. I do not know if you ever tried to listen to your wife, to your husband, to your children, to the car that goes by, to the movement of your own thought and your own feeling. For out of that listening, in which there is no action at all, no intention, no interpretation, just the very act of listening brings about a tremendous revolution in the very root of the mind. But most of us are so unaccustomed to listen. If we hear anything contrary to our habitual thought, we get terribly agitated. If one of our pet ideals is kicked around, we get terribly excited. We have our own vested interests in ideas, in properties, in our own experience and knowledge. And when any of that is questioned, we lose balance and resist anything that is being said. So, if you will kindly listen this morning to what is being said in that sense of alert, choiceless awareness, then we will see that you are following the speaker non-verbally, non-linguistic analysis, but moving with the meaning, the significance that lies beyond the word. It doesn't mean that you go to sleep or be in a beatific state of some sentimental, self-satisfying, gratifying state. On the contrary, this needs a great deal of attention. Not concentration, attention. The two things are entirely different. And if you so listen, perhaps you and I can go into great depths in which creation can take place. Because a mind that is fearful, that is anxious, that is worried over many problems, cannot possibly understand one of the most fundamental things of life, which is fear. Because if we do not understand fear, there is no love. And nor is there that sense of creation, not the act of creating, but that state of timeless, eternal creation, which cannot be translated or put into words, into pictures, into books. I'm going to talk a little bit about that, little presently, but before I go into it, we have to be free of this fear. Fear is not an abstraction. Fear is not a word, though the word has become much more important than the fact of fear itself. I do not know if we have really ever thought to be rid completely, totally and absolutely of fear. It can be done. So that there is never a shadow of it. So completely that that the mind is always ahead of the event. So that the mind is not pursuing fear, but rather ahead of fear, and therefore free of fear. Now, to understand fear, one has to go into the question of comparison. And also consider deterioration. Why do we compare at all? Is comparison progress? Or where there is comparison, there is progress, which is relative. "50 years ago, there was no atom bomb. Now we have got it. 50 years ago, there were not the supersonic planes. Now we have it. And another 50 years' time, we shall have something else." So, all progress, which is always comparative, is restrictive, is relative. And our mind is caught in that. Not only outwardly, outside the skin as it were, but also inside the skin, in the psychological structure of one's own being. There is this comparative evolution, which we call progress. That is, I am this, I have been that, and I shall be that. This thinking is comparative. And our whole sociological behavior, our relationship in business, socially, morally, ethically, religiously, is based on this comparative observation of ourselves in relation to a society, which in itself is the outcome of this comparative struggle. Comparison breeds fear. Do observe this in yourself. I want to be a better writer, more beautiful looking, more intelligent, more knowledge, have more fame in the world, be somebody, successful. Success, fame is the very essence of comparison. And therefore, psychologically, we breed constantly this fear. And comparison breeds conflict, the struggle. And that is considered highly respectable. You must be competitive to survive in this world. In business, in family, in religious matters. You must reach heaven, sit next to Jesus or whoever it be, your Savior. This comparative spirit of the priest becoming the archbishop and the pope. And that same spirit we cultivate very assiduously, very carefully through life. Being better, achieving. And our moral, ethical structure is based on this. So there is this constant state of competition, comparison, and the everlasting struggle to be somebody or to be nobody. That, I feel, is the root of all fear. Because that breeds envy, jealousy, hate. And where there is hate, obviously there is no love, and fear is generated more and more and more. As I said, you are just listening. You are not saying, how am I not to be comparative? How am I not to compare? What am I to do to stop comparison? You can't. If you did, you are doing it out of a motive of comparisons also. So you can't do anything. All that you have to do is just to see the fact of this whole complex thing called comparative struggle, existence. And if you act upon it, and if you try to alter it, you are caught again in the comparative spirit, in the competitive spirit, in trying to be something. So as I said, what is important is to listen. Just to observe without any distortion. And you will distort the moment you wish to do something about what you listen to. So, one sees the implication and the significance of this comparative evaluation of life. And we think comparison brings understanding. Comparing two pictures, two authors, two writers, and yourself as being not so clever, not so efficient, not so beautiful, not so all the rest of it. Now, can one live without comparison? In the world and inwardly, outwardly and inwardly. Never comparing. To be aware of the state of the state of a mind that is always comparing. To be aware of that, to recognize that as a fact, to abide with that fact, requires great deal of attention. And that attention brings about its own discipline, which is not compulsive, which is not the act of controlling, subjugating, denying. Because out of this attention, as I said, comes discipline. And you need this extraordinary discipline, which is very pliable. It has no pattern, in order to understand deeper, further, the whole question of fear. So as I said, this comparison, this attitude towards life, which is based on comparison, is the major factor of deterioration. Deterioration implies, does it not, the decaying, the dulling, the becoming insensitive. And therefore, the utter lack of intelligence. And one of our major factors in life is this deterioration. Not only the body deteriorating, but the mind, the thought, the structure of one's own brain, the cells within, are always deteriorating. We are getting older. And the cause of this deterioration is conflict, effort. It's like an engine that is running with a great deal of friction. And therefore it cannot function properly and therefore deteriorates all the time as long as it's running. So, comparison, conflict, effort not only breeds deterioration, but also fear. And where there is fear, there is darkness, and there is no love, affection, understanding. Now, what is fear? Have we really ever come face to face with fear? Or with the idea of fear? And there is a difference between the two. The actual fact of fear and the idea about fear. The two are something entirely different. Most of us are caught in the idea about fear, the opinion about fear, the judgment, the evaluation. But we are never in contact with the actual fact of fear itself. I think this we have to understand rather widely and deeply. Say I'm afraid of the snake. I saw it one day and it has caused me a great deal of fear. And that remains in my mind as memory. And when I go out of an evening, this whole memory comes into operation. And I am already frightened of meeting a snake. So, the idea of fear is much stronger than the fact itself. The idea of death, the idea, is extraordinarily more vital, more poignant, more vital than the fact itself. Observe it in yourself. So we are never in contact with the actual fear itself. Just observe that. You can't remove the idea. You can't say, well, I'll try and meet fear without the word. You can't. But if you understand that you are never indirectly in communion with the fact of fear, with the fact of jealousy, with the fact of death, but only with the ideation, with that memory of that, then you will see a different relationship taking place between the fact and yourself. Right? Is this fairly clear? Right? So to us, the idea is far more important than the action itself. We translate or adjust or interpret action according to the idea. And we are never in action. We are always in action with the idea. And moment you realize this extraordinary fact that we function according to a formula, act according to a concept, an idea, and therefore never an action at all, or an action so incomplete that breeds problems. Once you realize that fact, then action becomes an astonishingly vital thing, not an action approximating an idea. Now, if that is clear, that we are much more familiar, more in communion with the idea rather than with the fact, more in communion with the idea of what beauty is and not in communion with beauty or with evil, whatever it is, then you will see that if you understand it, then there is only the fact of a fear. Fear is not an abstraction, it's always in relation to something. I am afraid of death. I am afraid of what public opinion says. I am afraid of not being popular, not being known. So, fear is always in relation to something. Fear of dark, fear of public opinion, fear of dying without achieving anything. And so on, so on, so on. So, there is the word which is not the fact. The word is the symbol of the fact. And for us, the symbol is far more important than the fact. Religiously, in every way. Now, if you are aware of this, then you are confronted with the fact alone of fear arising from something in which the idea is totally absent. Right? You're following what I'm saying? I hope I'm making myself clear. So, to understand fear, one has to understand how the mind operates with regard to facts. Can the mind free itself from the word, the symbol, the idea, and observe the fact? Without interpretation, without translating, without saying I must, any activity towards the fact at all. If it operates with an opinion, it's merely dealing with ideas. Right? So this is very important to understand, this fact, that we are never in communion with the fact, but only in communion through an idea, through a symbol. And therefore no communion with the fact at all. And if I want to be in communion with the fact, the idea must completely disappear. Right? Now if you proceed from there, we will see where it leads us. Then there is the fact that I am afraid of what somebody says. Of death. A dozen things. Now what has taken place when you are not observing the fact through an idea, through a conclusion, through a concept, through memory? What actually takes place? You're following? I hope you're doing this as I'm talking. What actually takes place when you are looking at the fact without conclusions, without memory, without idea? First of all, there is no division between the observer and the thing observed. You never say, then I am afraid. I being separate from the thing. You understand? You're coming with... Am I making this clear? Because the cause of separation has been removed. You are directly in relation with the sensation which you call fear. Therefore you, with your opinions, ideas, judgments, evaluations, concepts, memories, all that is absent. Therefore there is only that thing. This is arduous what we are doing. This isn't just a morning's entertainment. Because I feel one can leave this tent this morning and be completely, deeply free of fear altogether. And then you are a human being. So, you are now facing the fact that sensation, that apprehension, which an idea has brought about. You understand? I am afraid of death. I'm taking that as an example. I'm not talking of death. I am talking about the fear of death. Death, to an ordinary living man, is an idea. It's not a fact. The fact is when he is himself in a state of dying. He has observed, he has seen, he has watched his mother, his wife, or the people die. And the concept, the observation, the feeling that he is also going to die, which becomes an idea, obviously, and that breeds fear. Or that he looks through the idea which prevents him from being directly in contact with the fact at the moment. Right? So I see, so one observes, there is only fear. And the cause is obvious, what has brought about that fear. There is no interval between, please listen, there is no interval between the observer and the thing observed. You understand? It is in this interval thought arises. Thought being the ideation, the verbalization, the memory, which offers resistance to the fact. Right? So when there is a gap in the sense where there is the absence of thought, which is time, then you are completely confronted with the fact. Then the fact operates on you and not you operate on the fact. I hope you're getting all this. Is this too much of a morning? You see, for me, to live with fear of any kind is, if I may use the word, evil. That's the worst evil you can live with. Evil, you understand, I'm using that. Because that perverts all your thinking, all your life. It breeds hate. It distorts thought. Thought is always distorted anyhow. So, it is absolutely necessary for the religious man to be completely free of fear. Outwardly as well as inwardly. There is the natural, spontaneous response of the physical to safeguard itself, which is natural. When you see a snake, to jump. That's a natural, self-protective instinct. But it would be abnormal, a neurotic state, when there is danger, not to jump from it. But any desire to be secure at any level of one's being, inwardly, psychologically I'm talking about, breeds fear. So, one sees all round the effect of fear. And one also observes that it is important, essential, that the mind should not be a breeding ground of fear at any time. So if one has followed this morning, attentively listened, then you will see fear is never in the present. It is always evoked through thought. What will happen? What will take place? So, fear, thought, and time go together. So you have to, if one is to understand and go beyond fear, there must be the understanding of thought as well as of time. Now, as I was pointing out, all comparative thinking must stop. All sense of effort, which is involved competition, ambition, the worship of success, the striving to be somebody. And when that is understood, there is no conflict at all. You understand? And hence the mind is not in a state of deterioration. Because then it is capable of meeting fear, not be the breeding ground of fear. You understand? Now, this state is absolutely necessary to understand what is creation. For most of us, life is a bore. It's a routine. There is nothing new in it. Whatever new takes place, we make into a routine immediately. They paint a picture and that becomes for the second a new thing, and the next minute is over. The pleasure, the pain, all the endeavor becomes a routine, a bore. The everlasting struggle that has very little meaning. And man is always seeking for something new. The new in picture, the new in painting, to express something new, to feel something new. Not always translated in terms of the old. Make it some technique, some clever trick by which you can express yourself and be self-satisfied, which again becomes a terrible nuisance, an ugly thing which you kick against. So we are always in a state of recognition. Anything new is being recognized immediately. Otherwise, it's not new. So, the process of recognition for us is astonishingly important. You understand? The process of recognition. I recognize what I was, what I am, what I will be. So I'm always functioning, the thought is always functioning from the field of the known. Please, somebody faints, leave them. So the moment you recognize it ceases to be new. You understand? And part of our education, part of our experience, the daily living, is a process of recognition, the constant repetition of recognition which gives continuity to existence. And with that structure of our mind, we proceed in life. We search. We ask if there is anything new. We want to find out if there is God, if there is this, if there is that. Because from the known, we want to find out the unknown. And it is the known that causes fear of the unknown. So we say, I must find it out, recognize it, and bring it back into the known. This search, painting, in art, in everything, in music, is for the new, but always translated into the old, and interpreted into the old. Now we want to point out something entirely different. This act of recognition and interpretation and action and fulfillment is not creation. You cannot possibly express the unknowable. What you can express is the interpretation of the recognition of what you call the unknown. So, if you are interested in it, to find out for oneself what is creation. Without understanding that, life becomes routine. You get very bored with it very soon and very quickly. There is no change, there is no mutation. So we are pointing out something, which is that there is creation in which that creation itself is the act of creation. Not the interpretation or translating that into canvas, into books, into a relationship. You see, after all, the mind, with all the 2 million years and more of memories of the animal, and the search to go beyond all that, is still part of the human mind. And from there springs recognition, the desire to recognize. And the new, the something that is totally, entirely different, which is love, cannot be understood by a mind which is caught up with the old, trying to recognize the new. Am I? Look, this is one of the most difficult things to communicate. And we would like to communicate. Because if the mind is not in that state, it is always in a state of deterioration. And that state is a timeless entity. It is not comparative, it is not utilitarian. It has no value at all in terms of action. You can't use it to sell a picture of your beastly little painting, or write your marvelous Shakespearean poems. But without that, there is really no love at all. The love that we know is jealousy, hedged about with hate, anxiety, despair, misery, conflict. All that is not love. Love is something new, everlastingly new, unrecognizable. It is never the same. And therefore love is the highest state of uncertainty. And it's only that state of mind that is in that is love, can understand this extraordinary thing called creation, which is God or any other name you like to give it. So the mind that has understood the limitations of the known and is free of the known, only such a mind can be in that state of creation in which there is no factor of the If you want to ask any questions of what we have talked about this morning, is the feeling of fear. Is the feeling of having individual will the cause of fear? Probably it is. You say, individual, what do you mean by an individual? Are you an individual? Actually, are you? Because you have a different body, different name, a bank account, disease, crippled, limited. Are you an individual? You are conditioned like everybody else. And within that limited area which you call the individual, everything arises. Our miseries, our despairs, jealousies, fear, everything comes from that limited, narrow, fragmentary existence. And that we are so very proud of it, with our individual souls and our individual wills and, messy little stuff. And with that, we want to proceed, uncover God, truth, love, and all the rest of it. You can't. All that you can do, if you are attentive, is to be aware of your fragment and the struggles of the fragment. And the fragment can never become the whole. Do what you will, the spoke can never become the wheel. So one has to find out, inquire into this whole problem of separative, narrow little existence called the individual. Yes, it's awfully difficult to talk about serious matters when little boys and people who don't give complete attention. Not that I am objecting to little boys or those people who want to come casually and wander off. But when we are talking of very serious things, we need certain attention. So in all this, what is important is not your thought and your opinion or my thought and my opinion, but to find out what is true. And to find out what is true, mind must be without fear. So completely denuded of fear so that it is totally innocent. And it's only out of that innocence there is creation.